Production is power. A great recruiter does not necessarily equate to a good leader. Production should not come at the expense of soldier mental health and morale. And these are some of the things that I have heard in the complex context of leadership in Army recruiting. And I am not even going to pretend that I have something even remotely close to an answer to some of the incredibly complex leadership challenges that exist in the environment of Army recruiting. But I do think there's some low-hanging fruit. I do think there are some things that we can easily grasp and institute that can help us in our situation. And I want to share a story about a leader balancing people and production. This is a story about a leader balancing people and production. And I believe it's a lesson that every recruiter and every soldier wishes their leader understood. That's how significant it is. I think every soldier wishes their leader kind of really had a firm grasp on this lesson. And it's the story of King Rehoboam in the Bible. He is the son of Solomon. Solomon was the king of Israel and built the temple and built the palace and did a lot of wonderful things. But now he's dead and his son is just taking command. And there's a scene where the people approach Rehoboam like the first day he's king, and he's faced with a challenge, a puzzle, a decision to make. And the story kind of unfolds of how he goes about making that decision. So I want to read to you right now some of the passage here. So it's 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 4. The people are coming to King Rehoboam, new King Rehoboam, and they come with these words. They say this. They say, this is verse 4. Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. So that's what they say to Rehoboam, like his first day being king. And I see three things in this. Number one, they're saying, you know what? Your dad worked us hard, very hard. And again, Solomon was the king who built the temple in Israel. He built this huge palace. He had these major projects. And in doing so, he taxed and worked his people very hard to get them done. But they are done now. And the people are saying, hey, we need a break. So number two, that's what they're saying, is saying, take care of us. We're tired. We're weary. We've been overworked. We need a break. Take care of us. And the third thing they're saying, if you take care of us, we will serve you. We will be loyal to you. In other words, if you take care of us, we will take care of you. And so that's their opening salvo, if you will, to King Rehoboam. So verse 5 says, Rehoboam answered, go away for 3 days and then come back to me. So the people went away, which isn't a bad response. He's like, okay, you gave me, what your desires are. Let me ponder it for a little bit. So he doesn't make a knee-jerk response, and he thinks about it. Then in verse 6, it says, King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. How should you advise me to answer these people? He asked. And again, that's a good move. Okay, so he's 2 for 2. He asks for a little time, and then he gets some counsel. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 14. In a multitude of counselors, there is safety. So far, so good for the king. And then in verse 7, the elders' guidance. This is what those folks say. He says, what should I do? And so the guidance he gets, if today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants. So they're saying, hey, listen, take heed of what they said. And if you do what they ask, you will have their loyalty. It's the old infantry rule that I've heard numerous times in my Army career, and I think it makes sense. If you take care of your soldiers will take care of you. And that's what they're saying here. But Rehoboam takes that counsel, puts it in his pocket, and look what he does in verse 8. Let me read 8 through 11. It says, but Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. So he rejects the advice of the elders and he goes to his peers. And he asks them, what is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, lighten the yoke your father put on us? So he doesn't get the answer he wants from the elders necessarily. So he goes to his peers and listen to what his peers say. The young men who had grown up with him replied, tell these people who have said to you, your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter. Tell them this, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid a heavy yoke on you. I will make it heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions. So that's the advice his peers give him. And just a couple of notes on that. Number one, he says, you know what? My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. I'll never forget my Old Testament professor, Dr. Oswalt in Asbury Seminary, said that in the Hebrew, the word waist is actually loins, if you will. So he's saying my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. So you kind of fill in the blanks there of what kind of word picture Rehoboam, is being told to tell these people. And he's saying, you know what? Come down. The wisdom or the advice of his peers is saying, come down even harder. Demand more production. Demand more results. Don't get easier, get tougher, and show them that you mean business and that you will demand results from them. And so, the words that they use here, I will make it heavier and I will scourge you. If you don't do what I want, I will do this. This kind of show of force. He's the young people, the peers, if you will, are telling Rehoboam to do. So what does Rehoboam do? Verses 12 through 15 here. He's gotten advice from the elders and from the peers. It says 3 days later, Jeroboam, who was like the leader of the people, if you will, the people's king, and all the people returned to King Rehoboam. As the king had said, come back to me in 3 days. The king answered the people harshly, rejecting the advice given him by the elders. He followed the advice of the young men and said, my father made your yoke heavy. I'll make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions. I'm tough. So the king did not listen to the people. Listen to that, verse 15. So the king did not listen to the people. For this turn of events was from the Lord to fulfill the word of the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah the Shilonite. And so this is what Rehoboam's edict is. More production. I want and will demand more. So how do the people respond? Verse 16, and we'll talk about verse 16 for a second. When all of Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king. And this is what they said. What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, O Israel. Look after your own house, O David. And so the Israelites went home. And so I see three things there. The Israelites' response. The first thing they say is, what share do we have in David? Now King Rehoboam was like the grandson of David, in the legacy of David. So the Israelites saying, we have no part of this. We have no part of you. We have no connection with this leader or this leadership. Trust is gone. They're basically saying, there's nothing good here for me. So the next thing they say is, to your tents, O Israel, retreat, go back to your office, shut the door, and don't worry about it. There's this distance between the people and the leader. And then finally they say, look after your own house, O David. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a soldier say, you know what, I'm going to worry about me, I'm going to get mine, and that's it. It no longer is about the team or unit success. Now it's about individual survival. And that's what it was for Israel now. It's like, you know what, if Rehoboam, you're going to be this way, I'm just going to make sure my family gets to eat, and I don't care about the nation, I don't care about the unit. Any hope of operating with a unified purpose is now gone. And so what happens is most of the tribes of Israel revolt. Most of the tribes of Israel at this time, after Rehoboam's edict, they rebel, they pull away, and the nation is fractured. Some are loyal, and it's like that with this kind of leadership. Some remain loyal, but many depart. Many emotional distance, and the unit, the country is never the same. And to me, this story of King Rehoboam highlights the most important leadership challenge in army recruiting and the army in general. And let me say that and say it clear. It highlights the most important leadership challenge in army recruiting. How can I balance people and production? Making mission does not have to come at the cost of soldier morale and mental health. They do not have to be two polar opposite fighting forces. How can we make them work together? How can we put people and production together? So leaders, I believe this. If you are a leader, and this goes from the top to the bottom of leadership, you need to have the courage to ask your people two questions. This week, after you hear this video, ask them two questions. Question number one is, how am I as a leader showing you that production is important? How am I showing you that I need and I want and I expect and I demand results? We need to make mission. And I believe it's probable that many soldiers and recruiters will be able to say, here's how you demonstrate to us that production is important. But you need to ask a second question as well. How am I, as a leader, showing you that I think people are important? How am I showing you that people are important? And sit back and let your soldiers answer. It does not have to be one or the other. You don't have to be production over people or even people over production. And I want to close with a quote from Sun Tzu, The Art of War. You know, a classic, still thousands of years later, a classic book in army strategy. And I think he really ties into this balance of people and production. And he says this, and this is great leadership advice: regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look upon them as your own beloved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death. If, however, you are indulgent and unable to make your authority felt, you're kind-hearted, but unable to enforce your commands, then your soldiers will be like spoiled children and useless for any practical purpose. Production and people. How am I as a leader showing you that production is important? Question number one. But question number two, how am I as a leader showing you that I think people are important? It is perhaps the greatest leadership challenge in USAREC today. And I think the best leaders in USAREC are the ones that effectively walk that tightrope. So take these words, make USAREC, make the Army a better place to work, walk in peace, have the best day possible, and stay awesome.